not making a choice is a choice.
Hey, Creating Maven. I'm Joy Spencer, your reframe specialist, with one important message. Your real work, it's not your job or your career. Your real work is what you create. And what you create is what sets you apart and makes you incomparable. It's your legacy. I'm here to show you a whole new way of working so you can create with your gifts, make a unique contribution, and finally get paid to be yourself. This is Reframe to Create.
I know you've had this experience. You go out with a bunch of your closest friends and everything is fun. Everything is going really well until you have to make a group decision about something. Anything. Maybe it's which restaurant to settle on, or who's driving, or how things should be split up. It may not be an argument, but there are lots of options up on offer and lots of opinions being thrown around. And if you're like me, you may just want it all to end as soon as possible. So you throw in your vote in the whatever the group wants pile and hope for the best. But it doesn't end up being the best, does it? For me, this used to mean we'd end up at a Mexican spot because everyone seems to love tacos for some reason. I say it used to mean this because I've since stopped taking up the group vote and now make it very clear that Mexican food is a no-go for me. I'm more intentional now about making a choice and voicing it rather than letting the decision be made for me, because I rarely, if ever, like the choice that's taken when I let someone else or circumstances choose for me just because I lack the energy or the courage to make a clear choice for myself. You probably know that doesn't usually turn out well from your own personal experience. And I hope you stop doing things that way and stop operating that way, and know that the choice to not make a choice is a choice, even if it is a passive one. And it is a choice that still has consequences. And I think that maybe that's what it is. I think we think that if we don't choose, we can avoid consequences. But that's a big lie. You can't avoid consequences by avoiding choices. So we might as well be active in the choices that we are making. The same goes for choices that we make or don't make together. Today, I'm diving into part 2 of a 3-part conversation that I kicked off in episode 123, What You Won't See Will Kill You. In this conversation series, I'm diving into the 3 steps of narrative identity reclamation and reformation that need to take place before you can innovate and lean into creating something new. Because you can only go as far as who you are, and you always create out of your current level of narrative identity. So what you create is directly connected to who you are and to who you believe you can be. It's connected to your narrative identity. This is true for you as an individual, and it is especially true for you as a team or organization. And that's what my focus is on for these episodes. The collective we that's yearning to create something together, but keeps getting stuck or running into roadblocks. The 3 steps you need to take are that you must first reveal, then reclaim, until you finally reframe your narrative identity so that you can create the impact you're looking to create. You must reframe to create by reveal, reclaim, and then reframe. In the last episode, we discussed reveal, where you unearth your current narrative identity and look at what in it may be serving or sabotaging you. And today, we're digging into the second step, which is to reclaim. And as you might have guessed at this point, reclaiming is all about making intentional choices. Now that you've revealed your narrative identity, it's time to reclaim the parts, and only the parts that work. Only the parts that are generative and life-giving. And to identify what that is, we must ask some very specific questions. Not just any questions, though, but questions using an appreciative inquiry lens. I love appreciative inquiry. It's the lens through which I do all of my organizational development work and coaching. If you've never heard of it, the textbook definition is that appreciative inquiry is, and I quote, A strengths-based approach to organizational development and change that focuses on discovering what works well within a system to build a positive future, rather than identifying and fixing problems. It uses storytelling and positive questions to uncover strengths, envision possibilities, and create shared goals. Foster innovation, engagement, and commitment by focusing on potential and successes. What I love about it is that it's an approach that goes digging for treasure, sometimes in the most unlikely places. And what's a more unlikely place than the narrative identity that might have been your problem all along? So what are the appreciative questions to ask after you've revealed the parts of your narrative identity and now want to do the work of making some hard choices and reclaiming what works? Here they are. 1, what about who we are is life-giving and generative? What about who we are is life-giving and generative? After you've revealed your narrative identity, you want to go digging for treasure by asking this question, just scanning everything that you've sort of pulled to the surface and asking, what in this is life-giving and generative? This is where you sit back and do what David Hutchins asked us to do in episode 120, which is to start making sense of your stories, but not any kind of sense, right? Appreciative inquiry is directing us to look for what is generative and what is life-giving. And by what is life-giving and what is generative, I'm asking you to think about the parts of your narrative identity that get you feeling and being creative. What parts help you to create one thing after another, and after another, right? Over and over again. These are the parts you want to lean into because they're generative. They generate new things. They generate life. And you want to just sort of like look at these, right? Identify them and know what it is and see it through that lens, because you're going to make some choices. And if you don't make these choices, they will be made for you. And what I mean by this is that if your team refuses to intentionally choose what parts of your narrative identity you want to take on and refuses to do so out loud and together, you will suffer from shadow narrative identities and agendas. The strongest personalities, the most influential, and not necessarily the loudest, because folks can be really sneaky about this, they will carry forth a narrative identity that will operate in the shadows. And I don't want you to think that they have nefarious intent, although some people might. It's not necessarily nefarious intent. It's just that we have a need for clarity and some sort of narrative identity, something to rally around. And when it's not clear or it's vague or it's murky, people will rally around those who have one, even if it's a shadow narrative. I've seen it happen too many times, and even recently seen the fallout when a leader struggled to draw the line in the sand out loud to help their team get aligned on their narrative identity. What happened? Well, the shadow identities took over and sabotaged iteration after iteration of the strategy planning session. Because you always have a narrative identity. Teams always have one. It may be fragmented or folks may be misaligned when it comes to it, but you have one for sure. There is one operating. And the only narrative identities that help teams to get to a creating finish line together are the ones that are cohesive, clear, said out loud, and that everyone is aligned with. You always have a narrative identity. You get to choose if it's one you choose and are aware of, or if it's one that you're not really choosing and are unaware of it, but that's driving everything nonetheless. So choices must be made, and the next 2 questions must be answered. 2, which parts of our revealed narrative identity do we want to reclaim and keep? You must choose and name these parts together and out loud. Nothing must be assumed or treated as obvious or as a thing that goes without saying. No, you have to say it. This is a mistake not to say it. People and teams think that they don't need to say it and then end up shocked, right? When the unspoken doesn't seem to get lived out. Like, go figure. You must intentionally choose what parts of your narrative identity are life-giving and generative that you want to keep and take forward with you, and you need to name it out loud. And you must do it together and commit to it together. Then you must make another choice. 3. Which parts of our revealed narrative identity do we want to leave behind? This is a doozy. This is a tough one. Folks struggle to let go and leave things behind. But here it's also important to call a spade and name out loud what you will be leaving behind, what you will be uncommitting from, right? What you will be shedding. Without saying this out loud, when folks slip back into this comfortable aspect of your narrative and it becomes an issue, there will be no accountability. There will be no grounds on which your team members or other team members can name the issue and pull each other back from the brink. By naming this, it empowers the entire team to be able to say, hey, hold up. We already decided this. We decided to leave this part of ourselves behind. We acknowledged the value that it had for the time. We had a funeral for it and we've let it go. And now it's time to move forward. So that's it. These are the questions you need to ask in order to reclaim the part of your narrative identity that is working for you. The questions are, what in our narrative identity is life-giving? Which parts do we want to keep? Which parts do we want to leave behind? These are the questions for the second step of this overarching process of reclaiming your narrative identity. And in the next episode, I will talk about the third and final step of reframing, which is what sets you up for the ultimate success of moving on in power to create and innovate together. If we are going to create, if you and your team are going to create the impact I know you are here to create, then you need to be willing to do this very important work, this work of reframing first so that you can create. You need to be able to not only see what's already killing your vibe, which is what we looked at in the last episode when we revealed your narrative identity, the existing one, but you need to be able to make intentional choices about what is life-giving that you want to take with you going forward and what you want to leave behind, which is what we did today in reclaiming. And in the next episode, we will reframe by reconstructing a new narrative identity for your team that sets you up to create the impact that you want in order to move forward. All the things that you want to create, all the impact that you want to have is on the other side of this work. And I'm here to help guide you through it and on to the other side. If you're ready to do this work now and to get your creating power back, then send me an email at joy@reframetocreate.com with the subject, narrative identity, so that we can start the work to help you reveal, reclaim, and reframe your team's narrative identity so that you can create the impact you are ready to have. It's time to reframe to create. See you soon, Creating Maven. And remember to ask, what will we create?